Welcome to DMAIC Decoded, where I cover the common reasons DMAIC projects fail so that you can avoid them. In this video, I will discuss what happens when we overlook scope changes so that you can recognize scope creep and take action. Let's go ahead and look at an example. Veronica works at BT90 Accounting as a junior accountant. She is leading a project to reduce the time it takes accountants to complete monthly tax filings. In scope for her project was North Carolina clients, the Charlotte office, small businesses, process adjustments, changes to roles and responsibilities. Out of scope for the project was clients outside of North Carolina, large businesses, changes to software, communication with IRS, and hiring additional staff. At the start of the project, she was confident that she could meet the 4-month deadline, allowing improvements to be implemented right before their busiest time of the year. There was a lot riding on this deadline, including a possible promotion. Let's see what happened throughout Veronica's project. In the define phase, the team started a 15-minute discussion on hiring an intern. As a result, she wasn't able to complete the input process output diagram and had to hold an additional meeting to complete the define phase. In measure, the team was surprised they were asked to gather data to complete observations and ask other people on their team to track their time. They pushed back and said, as a junior accountant and a project facilitator, Veronica should complete those actions. And so she did. In Analyze, the team brainstormed root causes. When doing the multi-voting activity, the team had the most interest in changing the form on the software they used to complete the monthly tax filings. This was not something they'd previously talked about in terms of in-scope or out-of-scope items. In Improve, the manager liked how things were going so much, she asked if they could also include South Carolina clients. In order to keep the manager happy, Veronica agreed with a smile. However, there were differences with the South Carolina clients, and it required another 3 weeks to include them in the improvements. This coincided with the team's busiest period, and as a result, the project was put on hold for 3 months. When Veronica picked up the project after those 3 months, 2 of her team members had left their positions. She gathered a new team together to review the actions and make the final improvements. It took another 6 weeks before she could actually move the project into control. The manager was frustrated with the process and with Veronica. She didn't get the promotion, and the management team questioned whether or not these projects were even right for the organization. The final documentation and celebration of the benefits was positive, but it was totally clouded by the frustration of management, the low enthusiasm of the new team members, and Veronica's disappointment in not getting that promotion. Our project scope is a way that we create boundaries around our project and define exactly what we're allowed to tackle and what we're not. The project scope gives us that boundary or that box as a facilitator so that we can focus closely on what matters. Project scope for a process improvement project isn't going to look like it does for project management. In process improvement, the focus won't be on the tasks and the milestones. The project phases and milestones are already established. Instead, the scope it will include items like the specific team or department, the regions included, the types of software, hiring and reorganizing decisions, hardware or capital spending, process steps, so maybe where the process starts and where it stops, improvement activities that we're allowed to take on. In DMAIC projects, we have a few points where project scope is defined. In the champion interview, we should learn about what is and is not part of the project. In the project charter or contract, we should align the team and add to the list. In updates to our champion, sponsor, and team, we should always be communicating the scope and any challenges that we're having around the scope. Now, let's look at some of the ways that Veronica's project had that scope creep and that it caused her trouble. In the define phase, the team started a 15-minute discussion on hiring an intern. There are 2 issues with this discussion. First, the champion explicitly said that hiring staff was out of scope for this project. Second, in the define phase, we're still understanding what the problem is, and we should not be discussing solutions. Veronica should have interrupted the discussion and said something like this: "That's an interesting idea, and I appreciate you sharing your ideas. Unfortunately, Angela, our champion, said that we're not able to hire new staff through this project. Today, we want to focus on the problem and the impacts of the problem. So later on, we'll talk about some of the possible improvements." So today, if we would look back at the problem, what is the problem that hiring a new intern may have solved? In Measure, the team was surprised they were asked to gather data, to complete observations, or ask members of their team to track their time. And they pushed back on gathering that data. The team in this case doesn't seem to understand the responsibility they took on as a result of joining this project. Our project team members are going to need about 1 to 3 hours a week for 12 weeks to work on this project. Some weeks they might have more, some weeks they might have less. As a facilitator or greenbelt, you need to lead them through that project, but you're leading the project team through these activities. It's not for you to do these activities, but for them to get that value out of them. They are not the one responsible for completing, you are not the one responsible for completing every action in the project. This is a team project, so the team needs to work together to understand the problem. By Veronica taking on these actions rather than the team, she's taken a valuable opportunity away from them. The team could have tripped over the truth themselves rather than receiving a report out from Veronica. The learnings that they would have had would have changed their perspective on the process and increased their investment and enthusiasm about the improvements. Let's look at that analyze phase. Now, in the analyze phase, the team brainstormed root causes. When doing the multi-voting activity, the team had the most interest in changing the form in the software that they used to complete the monthly tax filings. But during scope, Veronica failed to document this as in or out of scope. And that was because there was actually a discussion that the team had about this, but they couldn't really decide whether it should be in scope or out of scope. So they tabled that discussion. In almost every single project, there is an item that doesn't quite fit in scope or doesn't quite fit out of scope. This is something we can call on the line. It can be helpful to really create this third category so that you can use this on the line area. Items that are on the line are not in scope and they're not out of scope, but before being brought into scope, the champion has to be consulted and approve that this will be part of the project. So this allows the team some flexibility on some of those issues that are more contentious to say, if they come up, we may want to include them. When we fail to document these items at the appropriate time or when they come up in our discussions and to communicate those things, we really begin down this path that doesn't align with expectations. And at the end of the day, what that means is our project takes longer. Let's look at that improve phase. So when Veronica went to improve, the manager really liked the different ideas that the team had and how the actions were progressing. She liked it so much, she asked Veronica to go ahead and include the South Carolina clients as well. Veronica wanted to keep her manager happy, right? She didn't want to upset the manager. She wanted to achieve everything that the manager was excited about. So even before this request, we know that that project was running over its target. Knowing that the busiest time of the year was just right around the corner, Veronica should have been clear about what expanding the scope was going to do to the project deadline. By allowing it to be included in the scope of this project, it was too much to complete with the time given. Often when things are going well, management wants us to start scaling those improvements. And as always, management wants it now. But don't fall into this trap. Okay, please don't fall into this trap. There's not a restriction on how many projects you can do. So there's no reason you can't copy and paste this project and the learnings from this project to a new project. Rather than including and extending the requirements in the scope of this project, suggest that those actions can be added to a new effort or a new piece of work and see that addition as a separate effort. This piece of work can still happen simultaneously, but it should be kept as that separate effort from the main project, and it should have different milestones and different deadlines. Scope change is just a really easy, subtle way that our projects start to get sabotaged. So I want to make sure that you avoid falling into those pitfalls. So let's look at some of the things that you can do to not fall into those pitfalls. So one thing that you can do is you can include that on the line scoping section in your scoping document, right? So that on the line section you can include in your scoping document. You can identify with the team and champion a quality list of in-scope and out-of-scope items. You can clearly define the roles and responsibilities with your team when they join the project. As quickly as possible, you can start to identify those places that scope is creeping, and you want to make sure that you address those things immediately. And finally, be transparent with your team and the champion on what that adjustment to scope might mean. As a result of this video, I hope you can recognize these common pitfalls and avoid them for the future. For more support in your DMAIC project, you can check in on my Udemy course, DMAIC Decoded, where I share with you the step-by-step actions, templates, resources, and agendas you need to complete a DMAIC project.